we know that outsourcing of labor-intensive digital creative services, if you will, is happening on a large scale, and particularly, for instance, animation. But we don't really know about the effects that this has on the firm level. I mean, what type of firms benefit the most, in which ways, how do benefits depend on ownerships and business models and so on. And we also don't know much about the impacts of this animation outsourcing on the surroundings of firms. I mean, is it good or bad thing for, say, Germany or Denmark to do animation outsourcing to India, for instance? And is it a good thing for at the recipient end, for instance, these emergent animation clusters in Taiwan or India? Is it a good thing to receive this work? Does it create impetus for growth, or is it just a temporary development? I mean, what we did was to do a range of case studies of firms that outsourced, in particularly to India from Europe. So, and we did case studies both at the European end and the Indian end, at the center end and the recipient end, if you want. And we interviewed managers on site and about how they designed the outsourcing activities and how they developed as a consequence of that. And we were particularly interested to see whether there were differences in how locally owned firms and multinational subsidiaries, how they create value and build capabilities in the companies as a result of these outsourcing activities. And so we found at the European end, for instance, there's huge benefits from outsourcing, both for firms and for industries. It's clearly it empowers product development, lots of spillovers and so on. There's every need to embrace that activity. But there's also a sort of a path dependence of outsourcing activities. So if there's some creative firms that outsource animation to, for instance, Taiwan, then other firms in the same industry in that region will then follow the same pattern. So we'll outsource to the same region because it depends a lot on their personal relationships. They take advice, they listen to each other, they observe each other and so on locally, and then they simply go for some of the same companies abroad that they can outsource to. That's not necessarily very rational, but it is difficult for them, of course, to get the best advice and information about the best potential matches abroad and so on. So for policymakers, there's a sort of a task here to empower the digitally creative industries and firms in Europe to outsource, to find better matches for the outsourcing activities, right? Because many of these firms that outsource are quite small, actually, hence depending a lot on their personal relationships. And actually, paradoxically, the firms they outsource to in India, for instance, are quite big firms and quite powerful firms. So you usually tend to think that you have the powerful European firms holding the IP rights outsourcing to these poor little disempowered Indian firms. But actually, we go to India and we have these firms of several thousand employees receiving outsourcing from these tiny production companies in Europe. So the power relationship is a little bit different than we think. And if we then look at it again from the Indian end, we found that the multinational companies that have moved into India in order to sort of become producers of animation services for Europe and North America and so on, they were much better than the local Indian firms to capture value and build competencies as a result of these international collaborations. But they're also much less prone to spill over these capabilities and their skills to the local area, to the local industry. They use fewer local suppliers, they have lower labor turnover, they get less engaged with the local industry association, and so on. But the local firms use all that, they use the local suppliers and so on. They just have less to offer. The multinationals focus a lot on the parents, on supplying the global value chain, and they look inwards compared to the local ones. So again, there's a policymaker task here at the recipient end to try and sort of to create these, to build infrastructures and to try and get multinationals involved in building capabilities at a cluster level, if you will. And then look again at the Indian, and we also found that the personal relationships matter a lot there. So the locally owned firms, not the multinationals, when they find clients in Europe, Germany, Denmark, France, and so on, they again use their personal relationships. So they have studied abroad, they have worked in the UK or something, and now they leverage these personal connections in order to find clients and coordinate the work with them. And this whole importance of personal relationships for outsourcing in the digital creative industries is quite promising for future research. And also there is actually a potential policymaker relevance here, because I mean, sort of the empowerment that I talked about before, trying to make firms in Europe able to find better matches when they do outsourcing, be that in Asia or elsewhere, could actually be to provide them with the information, i.e. the personal relationships that make them able to find the right recipient firms at the other end. So you immediately think about festivals and conventions and fairs and so on. It's not just branding activities. They actually build some of these relationships that makes firm able to outsource later, and also accepting international students or sending your own students out for exchanges and so on may actually have much more valuable impacts on outsourcing and industry performance in the longer run that policymakers tend to think of right now. Well, innovation is, again, the creative industries, and particularly the digital creative industries, is getting very globally distributed. So an innovation of a computer game or an animated film and so on doesn't happen at one particular location. It happens at multiple locations around the world, and these new digital tools of actually fine slice the value chain, of distribute tasks, and sometimes even to animate in real time. So you have Indian animators working in real time on one component of a computer game at the same time as German engineers and others are coding in Germany at the same time, and they plug into the same database at the same time. That means that innovation is suddenly getting very globally distributed due to digitization. But also that, whereas we used to think that the burning questions would be related to IP and property rights and so on, actually a lot of the questions now are actually related to coordination of these activities, because we didn't really find any huge problems related to IP and piracy and fraud and so on. The problems that managers at both ends kept referring to were actually the practical problems of coordinating this distributed innovation activity that happens in India, Taiwan, Germany, Denmark, France at the same time on the same product. So there's a whole agenda there for trying to empower firms to innovate in that way.